No, it's no pain, no gain. Go hard till the end. What's the use of playing the game if you ain't aiming to win? My feet.
Sure. So yes, as Dan mentioned, I was the founding engineer at Mint.com. This was basically my first startup and second gig in the Valley, so I've been here for a little over 12 years. And during Mint, I started writing a blog on engineering and entrepreneurship. I called it Femgineer because that's who I was. pointema.vjshankar.com was just, no one was going to type that. I certainly wasn't going to in the search bar. And after the acquisition at Mint, went on to do a number of things, built a few other products, taught at my alma mater, Duke, at their engineering school, came back here, was an EIR at 500 Startups, the accelerator program. And all through this time, I started thinking about how I wanted to get back into the startup space. And I'd just been invited to do a lot of speaking like this and teaching. And so I decided to basically take my 7-year-old, at that time, blog and make it into a business. And so now Femgineer is an education company, and we do online courses on product development, public speaking. Basically, we try to help techies with more of the soft skills, but our goal is to help them build products and companies. Dan mentioned that I should say that I've got a new course coming up. It's called Ship It, and you can check it out on Femgineer. We will start accepting applications later this week. Basically, you go from idea to a paid prototype, and then we'll offer the second version of the course called Grow It, really focused on customer acquisition later in the year. So it's a 2-part course. I also have a couple books out. One's called How to Transform Your Ideas into Software Products. Another one's called Present, Techie's Guide to Public Speaking. So that's a little bit about me. When I'm not doing startup stuff, I'm usually doing a lot of yoga just to balance it out. I live down in Palo Alto.
Well, thanks for coming, everyone. I'm Mike Freier. I run a small company called the Product Management Consulting Group. At a high level, I help tech companies and some startups with everything from product market fit to go-to-market strategy. I also have a network of companies, if you're building a hardware product, that can get through new product introduction and operations. In my spare time, I've taught at, I've spoken at UC Berkeley, San Jose State, a couple of local universities on the topic of product management. I do a little career coaching on the side, helping people in the Valley. And I spent 4 years with the Clean Tech Open, helping some startups there, trying to figure out product market fit and what are the opportunities in clean tech.
Wow, what a turnout. Hi, my name's Ray Combs. I am about a 20-year veteran here in Silicon Valley. I've been involved with multiple startups. This is my 4th startup I'm working on where I'm a founder. But it's the first one that I've been CEO. And the reason I decided to be the CEO is I got tired of idiot CEOs. So I decided to be one myself. In between startups, I've worked for larger companies like Amazon. I was original Kindle guy. We shipped Kindle 1 and Kindle 2. I worked at Lytro, as Dia talked about. We shipped the original Lightfield camera. I've had 2 tours of duty with LiveScribe, where we shipped a Bluetooth smart pen that records everything you write and synchronizes it to your iPhone. So I have a lot of consumer electronics and software background. So my background, even though I was a developer, programmer early on, I've kind of evolved into this kind of hardware, software product kind of guy role, and I really enjoy it. And my latest startup is called Sprimo, S-P-R-I-M-O, Sprimo. And we're making the world's smartest personal air purifier that works in an open office, covers you with a blanket of fresh air. So we're working on that, getting that thing going. We're in the seed round now. And so I can talk about all the way from, inception, conception, to productization, prototyping, all the way through shipping it to market and all that kind of stuff.
Good, thank you. So I want everybody to start thinking about your questions here and get ready because we're going to take some questions here pretty soon. I thought I'd start it off just in a broad sense though. At the end of the day, for all startups, time is money, and many times startups, they only have one shot at it. They only have enough resources to barely get one out the door. And so how do you, just from a big picture point of view, how do you just validate your idea from the start, right from the get-go? How do you figure out that you're going down the right path before you start committing a tremendous amount of resources to all this. So maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair that it feels like you only have one shot. Truthfully, you have more, but let's go with the die tomorrow theory. I think I see this all the time, especially from founders who tend to be very technical. I just don't get a lot of people who are going out and talking to customers. I know that's very trite, cliche, we hear it all the time, like go talk to your customer, go talk to your customer. I would actually say, don't just go talk to your customer, actually go talk to your ideal customer. Like, who do you really want? And I don't mean like the big guys, like, oh, I want to get Amazon. I mean, who would you enjoy working with or working for and building a product for, and giving them that first version of the product and then finding more like them. And I think this is oftentimes a place where people forget that, and they're worried about, okay, I need to get a big name, or I need to find people with deep pockets. But the truth is, you really need to have folks who are evangelists, who also have deep pockets, and have friends who have deep pockets. So it's not just about talking to your customer, but it's really thinking about who is that ideal. Sometimes that might be a persona that's similar to your own. Sometimes that might not be. So in the early phases, it's okay to have a few different segments, and then start to cross off like, ooh, I don't like that group. They're just penny pinchers, or they're always racking up customer support requests, or they're never going to convert. Who knows? Let me find somebody else, in a different genre, a different bucket. So I would say, find out who your ideal customer is, and then find ways to find more of them.
Yeah. So to build on that, when I think about customers, it's really a set of companies or people that are going to pay you money that have similar characteristics. So if you think about customers like a market segment, are you selling to grandmothers? Are you selling to teenage girls? Are you selling to working professionals here in Silicon Valley? If you think about the car companies, right, it's the German performance cars, and you see an opportunity to do something that maybe there's a gap in the market, or is it the economy, low-end, starter car for people just out of college? So initially, what you want to try to do is, even before you build a prototype, right, have conversations, right? You're thinking about this. Is it really a problem? And if you were to build it, right, what would the key feature set or the key benefits look like? And what are people willing to pay for it? And then I would go look at the competition and say, is there something just like you're building or thinking about building in the market? And you can start with a conversation, and then do some very low fidelity prototypes, right? Before you start to code, or before you start to prototype, other things you can show, even Play-Doh models, right? Whiteboard discussions are really, really effective for sort of proving out ideas. And then when you get 3 to 5 maybe companies who are saying, yes, that looks interesting, then you sort of have a longer conversation in terms of the engineering group, what you actually build for a early version product, and stay close to your customers, because they may have some early input that can shape the product longer term.
So I've always been a customer empathy kind of guy. That is, I like talking to customers. I like trying to understand what makes them tick, what their experiences are. And from that, I'll categorize, if you will, and kind of make a persona. And I really think that if there's anything anybody would take away from this conversation, is build a persona of your target customer, of your ideal customer in that case. And put a name to it. Carl the consultant. Find a find a photo off the internet that looks like Carl the consultant. Give Carl a personality. What car does he drive? What magazines does he read? What blogs does he read? What does he do for a living? Where do you go to school? Try to make it human. So it's real easy to think about Carl the consultant and say, gosh, Carl the consultant would love this feature, right? Why? Well, because I've talked to probably 100 people that are kind of like Carl the consultant, are very similar to my persona. I've written up the persona. I've found people that fit the persona. I've talked to them. I've understood how they use current products, what do they like about it, what they don't like about it. And this goes in this amalgamation of the persona that gives you that customer empathy. And that customer empathy is probably the most valuable asset you have in your toolkit. It's the voice of the customer during the development process. and allows you to make those bazillion little decisions you have to make every day to get your product in the right direction. Now, I use the term call a consultant, but it could be, Amazon, but then you have to kind of think like, who in Amazon? Is it AWS? And if it's AWS, is it the business development group? Is it the storage group? Is it the video group? So you really have to get down and start thinking about people and who your product, who it would appeal to, and how would they pay for it, and how much they pay for it, and what their pain points are, and all that kind of stuff. So really about persona, getting inside the customer's head and being that voice of the customer. That would be my 2 cents.
So this comes up a lot with our Founders Floor members, and they wrestle with it a lot. And it's one of those where when you're building the MVP, you found your target customer, you know what the pain point they have, you know how to satisfy that, and then you've got this whiteboard full of feature set, and now you're trying to figure out what's going to go in the MVP. You really want that launch to be grandiose and great. But at the same time, you're just limited on resources. It's starting to get a bloated app, for example, or a bloated product. How do you figure out? How do you define what goes into that MVP? How do you say this has to wait? This is integral. How do you do that?
I think similar to what Ray said, you've got to identify what's the strongest either pain, or if you're building an app that's more of an experience, what's going to produce the most pleasure, and really just focus on that one piece and be okay with launching that one feature. I think anytime you start to actually add more features, you do a couple things. The first is you end up confusing your customers because they're like, wait, what does this do here? And then the second thing is you're not even sure what they liked out of it. And so it's really valuable to just say, I'm going to put one feature out there, and even if it's a dud, that's pretty binary, right? Then you're like, oh, they hated it, great, get rid of that thing and let's put something else in. But when you've got 3 things, then you're weighing, well, do they like one 30%, the other one 50%? I don't know. But in those empathy conversations, you can very quickly start to figure out what is most valuable. I had a student, Hermione, a few years ago. She wanted to build this app for private practice doctors where she would get customers to come back, and she would get new customers. And she's like, that's what I'm going to build. I'm going to build this like customer app. And I asked her, is that really what private practice doctors want? She said, yeah, I think so. And well, did you talk to any of them? She's like, no, but I'm pretty sure. So I was like, why don't you just do me a favor and just go talk to 5 in your area? And she lived in Chicago. So she went out and talked to 5. She came back to me and she said, that's not the problem. The problem is actually that the customers that they have today are not paying them on time, and that their billing solutions are just really complicated. And what they really need is just one product that helps them get paid faster. So instead of like the 60, 90-day cycle, if they could get it down to 30 days, they would be happy to pay for such a solution. And that became her focus. So sometimes you've got to get that particular in terms of the pain.
Yeah, I agree with everything that said. If you have, a large number of features in terms of things to build, think about, what are the top couple that are really solving the big problem that you think your customers are looking to solve. And if you're not sure, go out and talk to a couple of customers. Just as a side point, I've got a friend that has a slide, it's a great slide. He's got a cupcake, and it says MVP. And then he's got a cupcake with 2 like googly eyes and some big frosting for like hair, and it's like, this is his delighter product. So it's the minimum delighter product. And what you really want to do is you want to delight customers as opposed to just continue to add features and tell people how grand your product is, but they're confused because more features typically add to more complexity. So early on, keep it really simple, solve a problem that everyone's like, if you had that tomorrow, I would pay money for it.
So how do you come up with that MVP? Ever tried to tell the story with too many angles? Selling product, creating a product is about telling a story, one story at a time, telling a longer story, one story at a time. And it's hard to have a point to the story if there's not a single clear moral to the story. And so you have to kind of think of it that way. That's one way I think about it. If I only had one feature, which one would it be? And then test it, and frankly, talk to people and get their facial reaction, meaning talk to them face to face. Get the feedback loop. So the customer feedback loop gets, you're seeing a theme here, right? You're seeing a theme, customers, talking to customers, customer empathy, personas. Feedback loop is a big part too. Getting that feedback to them and getting it back into your thought process is part of that. So try them. Do A/B testing. You know, this feature versus that feature. Talk to one person about one feature, the other person about a different feature, and do that, and then you can statistically do this. By the way, how many people do you really need to interview to find a good feature? If you have 7 people that are in your target market, you only really need to talk to 7. If you're seeing a definite trend that everybody likes this feature, 7, you're done. That's all you need. You only need like 7. Because to overturn it would require an incredible amount of negativeness. So 7 is like kind of a magic number. So talk to 7 people and get that 7 people nodding their head, and now you know what you need to do.
Great, thanks so much. When you do these customer interviews, a lot of people talk about features, right? But how do you figure out if people are actually willing to pay, and for what? And when is it time to monetize? And what would be a good pricing model? You know, you go freemium or you go free trial, you make it available for free, but then you monetize different ways. What's your take on the monetization?
So actually, in those early interviews, I recommend that you don't even talk about your prototype, don't bring one in, don't try to sell them on anything. And the reason I oftentimes say this is because people clamp up whenever they feel like they're being sold to. And so it's often better to just walk in there and say, you know, I don't have anything. In fact, I haven't built a thing, I haven't written a single line of code. I really just want to get to know you as a person, like the work that you do, you know, whatever your kind of persona is that you're after. And in the course of having that conversation, they're really leading the conversation the whole time. You're just kind of quietly sitting back and learning from them. And on this topic then of, you know, how do you monetize, there's some ways in which you can get that information. So when I built my second product, it's called BusyBee. It's a CRM solution for fitness businesses like yoga studios. And I would go in there and I would ask them a question like, you know, how much money are you losing today when people don't renew their membership? And how many people is that? And what is that costing you? And then very quickly I would do math, right? So if they told me, oh, you know, a typical membership is $100 a month, and if people don't renew, well, then we lose $100 a month. Well, that gives me a sense that if I could charge $100 and they would just get one more customer to renew, then that's, you know, break even for them. If I got more than that, great, right? So I start to get a baseline of what is valuable to them. I could also ask them things like, what are some other products and services that you use? So a lot of times people would say things like, oh, I use email marketing, that's like 20, 30 bucks a month. I use like some payment provider, etc. And then I can go and do research. And then I might ask them like, what's your biggest expense if you don't mind sharing? And that might be rent, right? And that way I know, okay, so that's like $2,000, not, you know, $10,000 or whatever. So I have a sense of what their price range is, and I can start to figure out how to then, you know, potentially monetize. When it comes to like actual models, whether to go freemium, subscription, all that stuff, I think you've got to really think about their behavior and what they're comfortable with. If you introduce a model that's like something brand new, then people are often going to balk at that. And in my case, it was simple because people were already buying yoga subscriptions, so for them it was like a no-brainer. Yeah, sure, I'm happy to pay $50 a month because that's what my customers do, right? So the more you can figure out a scheme in which it's like, you know, close to something that they're already purchasing, the more likely they're going to, you know, use your scheme as well.
Wow, great answer. I've got nothing to add.
Sorry, I shouldn't go first.
I'll just say that, you know, the way you judge if people will pay for it is when they pay for it.
Yeah,
How's that? Yeah, exactly. Credit card testing is a great way, you know, when they actually, you know, vote with their wallet, as they say. then you know you're onto something. So one example in my career, I'll get this from Amazon days. You know, when we were doing ebooks, you know, Jeff, he was a really smart guy. You know, he said, we're not going to do subscriptions. You don't go to Barnes & Noble and subscribe to books, you know. People don't do that. That's not really how people buy books. You buy the book, and you don't pay for the delivery, the truck delivery. You just buy the book. It's all included, right? You didn't pay for the guy to deliver it and put it on the shelf and all this stuff. You just bought the book. So that was the model. So using a familiar mental model that people are used to doing, that makes sense. For example, another service that I've been involved with called MemoSend, which was you could send a bundle of files of any size to anyone in the world for 10 cents. And it would get there securely, and it was like FedEx. You would get a return receipt and you would get it delivered, and you'd know it was delivered, you know when it was delivered, and all that stuff. And nobody's doing that. You know, that's a model that could work. So that's an idea for some of you guys out there. A delivery service that is like FedEx for files. So use a mental model that people understand. If you try to change the model, then you're going to get resistance.
I wanted to open it up to some questions here to the audience. And anybody have some questions here? I want to walk the mic over to you, and I'd like you just to speak into the mic for the question.
I have a question for Purnima. So for Mint.com, I've been really curious, what were the first features that you shipped to customers in your MVP? What did you leave out, and then what issues did Mint still have in the first version?
Sure. You know, I still get people who tell me, God, I love that first version, and then after that, like, I just stopped using the product because it was too complicated. So in that first version, I think we had maybe 2 or 3 basic features. The first was obviously add your accounts. So any account, whether it's credit card, checking, savings, etc. So add, but actually it's only like credit or checking accounts. You couldn't do things like add a student loan, you know, all these other vehicles. So you just the basic bank. And then from there, we did things like offered alerts. So if you had a low balance, we would tell you if there's low balance. If you got charged a fee, we would tell you that your bank charged you a fee. Those were kind of the delight things that no one else was doing. Today, Chase does that, and they're like, oh, we offer, you know, alert fees and stuff like that. So we were doing that back in the day, and people found a lot of value out of that. And that was basically it. So alerts and the checking and savings balance, nothing else, because we really didn't have time, and even just building that was a lot because we had to support, you know, lots of different banks and institutions. We had to secure everything. Like, it was more work to build the infrastructure than it was to build those features. So we spent more time doing that, and we spent a lot of time on customer acquisition. And then I think you had a follow-up. What were the other features that we added? Like, we added like investments, and people were unhappy with that from the beginning. They were like, oh, it's all wrong, it's telling me I'm in the red. And we were like, yeah, it's 2008, you are. So, I don't know what to tell you. So as we started adding more and more features, I think people felt like it wasn't truly what they had initially wanted. And so we saw a cycle of customers, but then there were some new customers that came in who were like, oh, I like this new investments feature, and I like this new budgets feature. So you'll start to see that too, like your early adopters want that streamlined version, and the people that come in might want a little bit more.
Question in the back?
I'm just wondering, how did companies like Kayak.com, Hotwire.com, company models like that, how did they make money as a startup when they were in the very beginning?
Lots of spam.
Spam.
I don't know, I'm not their advisors. Sorry.
One of the things I had a question on was, you know, outsourced consulting firms. You know, when is it okay? When is it the right time to do that? So, a lot of our member companies and a lot of folks we talk to, sometimes they don't have the skill set internally. When should they keep it in-house? When should they find that technical co-founder for that particular need? When is it okay to outsource it?
Before that, I'd like to address the question. This is travel, right? It's a very crowded space, but it's a very mature space. So a lot of distribution channels are fairly aligned. So Hotwire, Expedia, and other companies in the travel industry, you know, they take a cut of whatever they're able to sell. So it's an affiliate model, right? Booking a hotel, the hotel gives a kickback to the agent that booked, right? So at the beginning, you know, if you have a search engine for travel, you get money from, not from the actual customer, the customer pays is transparent to them, but you get a cut from the actual seller, right? So it's kind of commission that might not be disclosed, but yes, they do a revenue share. Now, the hard question is, how do you get those people to come to your site and book through your site? And that's where the spam comes into play.
So, question I was talking about earlier, a lot of our member companies have the same thing, which is, when is it okay to bring on an outside consulting firm in? When should you then feel like it's part of that piece of the business you need to have in-house? When should you try to find that technical co-founder to fill that void? And when's it okay to bring it outside?
So it really depends on timing. There are networking groups in the Valley where you could actually go find a technical co-founder or a business co-founder. You know, here, Hackathon Founders, there are some other groups. But if you need some specialized expertise, whether it's on the marketing side, the engineering side, the sales side, and so on, it's a real spectrum. So sometimes bringing in someone, you know, a day a week to help with a little bit of coaching in terms of what to do, and have them maybe do a little implementation will get you to the next level. Sometimes people are like, you know, we can't afford a full-time person in terms of salary and benefits, but we could afford someone 3 days a week. So that's a nice way to sort of bridge, and as, you know, as a company will raise a Series A or a Series B and they have more capital, maybe they'll bring that person in full-time, or they'll actually go out and try to hire someone as a full-time role.
Just a quick comment on the consulting versus in-house. I've always thought of it as kind of short-term versus long-term. If you have an immediate need that's burning, by the way, the consultant's really good at that kind of stuff. If you have a burning need of a, product management or a technical issue or a marketing event or whatever, short-term contracting is a good option. But if it's something you can do again and again and again, and it's something that's core value to your customer or to your company, that is a core enabling technology or a core marketing strategy, that kind of thing. Something you're going to do again and again and again. That's when I think you really need to kind of bite the bullet and get someone in to do it full time.
Okay. I have an audience question here.
Thank you. My name is Jay from Shanghai, traveling here. The question that when you have a new product developed, say the beta version, are you going to test the product in a small group of people until you are happy, then go to the mass market? How long will it take? Because it's about the timing issue. The mobile internet timing is important. So how long, or if not, or how long it will take for the test? Thank you.
So I think in part it depends on what's your level of risk. I work in product management, so is it good enough to ship? And that's a question or discussion between the product manager, the CEO, maybe the engineering quality guy, right? If it's if it's good enough to ship, you're aware of a couple of bugs, but it's not going to impact customers, maybe you ship it. If it's got a couple of major bugs where the system will crash, then you need to make a call, right? How many customers are we going to ship it to, and what's the impact in terms of customer feedback or negative customer feedback?
I interpreted that a couple of different ways. Your question was, do you start with a smaller core and then go to market faster? I interpreted it two ways. One is it about quality, like Mike was saying? Is it about, finding all the, bugs that you can and knowing what the problems are before you ship, and are they blockers or not? Or is it about fit and finish and feature completeness, that is compellingness. And both of those can be answered through progressive beta testing and internal testing. You know, you always do internal testing first, right? You always eat your own dog food, right? And then after eating your own dog food, you get kind of tired of it. So then you can get your neighbor to eat your dog food, and then your neighbor's going to tell you, probably, you're a nice guy, but he probably won't tell you what the problems are. That's when you need to get someone who's not in your inner circle to actually test it and really get to know them. Somebody who's willing to tell you that, hey, this kind of sucks, you know. That's what you really want to hear. If you get past that and he says it doesn't suck, then you know you're onto something. And by that time, you've gone through at least 3 rounds of kind of testing of features, and you have a certain feel for the stability and fit and finish and things like that. So that's kind of like how I would approach it.
Question in the back here. I'm going to have that person go ahead and yell out your question. I'll repeat it for the mic. Okay.
So my name is Atul Kumar. I just moved to Bay Area a couple of months back from the Sugar New York University area. So I thought I would do a startup after the university started. My startup is on healthcare. I'm trying to make the whole world healthy. So the target of one particular time New York, and I'm going to 2% of 7 million people. My question is, when is the right time to, like, I'm currently, bootstrap mode or whatever we call it, funding it myself, when is the right time to go for seed funding? Do I have the products and prototypes and samples to go through? Or should I get the seed funding now so they can have a good founding team with me, hire some people, developers and all of that? So I just want to advise on when the right time to get the funding.
Question was, a bootstrap startup. Product is not quite to prototype MVP level yet. When do you go for funding? Would it be before or after that? Question?
Yeah, so like I said, I was at EIR at 500 startups, and this is a question we get a lot. And I was there for about 18 months, and actually in that 18-month period, the dynamics of the market just changed completely. The first 6 to 9 months, I could help companies who had a prototype, some customers get close to $1 million in funding, assuming it was like a quality team and they were in a hot market. Today, that's like impossible. And the reason it's impossible, mind you, you'll read something different on TechCrunch, right? Don't believe TechCrunch. It's fine, you can quote me on that. What I'm saying is, if you are not a serial entrepreneur, like if you haven't had a successful exit, and it's your first time starting a company, it is very challenging to get capital. And even if you have something like a Google or Microsoft on your resume, like you might get your foot in the door, but really what investors are looking for is, do you have a solid team? Do you have a prototype? Do you have traction? And traction doesn't just mean you have a bunch of users. If you are a B2B business, you have some pilots, preferably ones that have a pipeline of maybe 6 figures. If you are a consumer app, then you sure as hell better be growing 50% week over week, otherwise they're not going to talk to you, right? So having like 1 million, close to like 1 million active users is what they're funding today. They won't say these things to you publicly. They'll come and tell me when I ask them, why aren't you, writing these checks? And that's because there's just a lot. I mean, look around. You have so many people who are out there looking for money, pitching the investors. So because of the supply of entrepreneurs, it's caused them to kind of hold back a little bit in terms of seed funding. So your best bet is continue bootstrapping, figure out a way to monetize, and if you're a B2B business, get those initial customers, some great logos. If you are a B2C business, grow really rapidly, figure out what your monetization scheme is going to be, and then start talking, but create a level of leverage, otherwise they're not going to talk to you.
So I talked to an investor a couple of weeks ago. He gave me some interesting stats. He said, as a rule of thumb, he'll talk to maybe a few thousand startups a year. So you figure maybe 4 meetings a day, 200 days a year, you kind of do the math. He's at the low risk side of investing, and he said his primary constraint is time. So whether it's 250K or 500K, it's not the money, it's his time, because he's got quarterly board meetings and blah, blah, blah. He'll invest in 6 or 8 companies a year. So you kind of do the math, you're at like 0.1%. So it's not impossible, but if you have the chance to bootstrap and actually get customers, paying customers, that's actually the easier track.
people always ask me, when is good time to raise money? And I say, never. You shouldn't raise money if you can. I mean, look at you. You have become entrepreneurs because you can work for somebody else. When you get an investor, you're going to get yourself a boss. Most likely, he's the one who can actually fire you. So think twice before you get money. Try to find various ways, try to bootstrap, try to, the best investor in your company is actually your customer. Have your customers pay you. Find a way for them to write you a check or swipe the credit card. So.
Have an audience question here?
Hi, my name is Eric Dew. I'm with Bullseye. I'd love to hear some response on, maybe Ray, you're the best person at the moment, on the manufacturing and supply chain and maybe any issues you may have had in that realm.
Oh man, that's how much time do we have? Is it midnight or something? So that's a long story. But things have changed in the last few years. I would say, my experience, like my current startup, is we're actually looking stateside more than we did in any other startup I've ever worked with. I mean, I've worked with the big guys, the Foxconn on down, and do people realize that, to make those millions of iPhones, Foxconn has like 150,000 CNC machines making the exact same piece. I mean, that's how they do it, right? And we can't do that in the States. It's just not possible. We don't have the engineers, we don't have the CNC machines, whatever. It's just not possible. That's okay. But what's happening is personalization and lower quantity kind of manufacturing, 3D printing. I've had my first prototypes, the first 10 made 3D printed, and I went to a buddy of mine who has a CNC shop, and he made 10 metal pieces, and we pieced it together by hand. We got our first 10 done locally. And then there's new startups with local manufacturing here in Fremont coming back. That's where the first Macs used to be made, that kind of stuff. So the low quantity kind of stuff, get done locally. That's my recommendation. So you can be there on site and say, oh no, that's not right. That's better. That piece didn't work. That color's not right. And get the feedback to the factory right with you standing there. And then get it right. Then it's up to them. The logistics guys are really good about taking a process, taking a line, saying this is how you made it, this is how the pieces were made, this is how you did injection molding, whatever, and then writing it all down, and then taking that to China or wherever you need to go to make more hardware, millions of hardware. That's much easier. That's less problems than trying to do it remotely with a bunch of different manufacturers. Try to do as much locally as you can.
Another audience question here? Pass it down.
Hi, my name is Thomas, and we do a GoPro stabilizer. And my question is just about what you almost just answered. And we pre-sold 2,000 units on Indiegogo. And I just would like to know the amount of units where you should go to China or you should stay here. Because if you have to set up all your scalable production line here and then sales are just growing up really fast, and I don't know if it's better to start here or there with this quantity.
So I can't give you an exact number in terms of where the cutoff point is, but I would talk to some good manufacturing and operations guy locally, and I would think about manufacturing in California, I think about manufacturing in North America, and then other parts of the world. And depending on where you are and where you want to scale, you can figure out, what's the right price point, what's the right quantity point, and so on, to get high quality product from your next production build to your 10th production build.
Another audience question over here? You can shout it out and I'll repeat it.
Sure. Yeah, this question for Nima primarily, I think, but it's in the early days of Mint, I'm pretty sure you were screen scraping and doing some basic technology. But in any case, the question is really, those financial institutions that you were connecting to, they may have been a little unhappy about you doing that, right? So the question becomes really, was it easier to get permission or forgiveness? And would you do it differently
So no, we were not screen scraping. And we were actually using, I'm kind of surprised that people, I thought everybody knew this by now. So actually we were using a service called Yodely. Does anybody know Yodely? They're actually, okay, yeah, a fair number of you. They've actually been around for, I think, maybe 15 years or more. So Yodely was actually one of the companies that did all this screen scraping. They had a 10-year-old technology at the time that we were building. They had already done all the screen scraping on about 3 to 5,000 financial institutions. So that made our lives actually really easy. In fact, they had a competing product to us, but they were selling their screen scraping technology to us. So we were paying for that, and that would let us download all the transactions from people's bank accounts. There were a couple companies, for example, ING, that were not happy with, in general, the screen scraping methodology, and so they would actively turn us off or whatever. But for the vast part, the banks were okay with it, meaning they didn't know what to do. And in the early days, we were like a blip on their radar, and they were like, yeah, we're a big bank, so, what are this pipsqueaks, Silicon Valley 20-something startup, we don't care about them. And so it didn't really matter. What I think became a bigger issue for us was the issue of quality. So even though we were using Yodely, they didn't always have the most accurate data, and we eventually had to start thinking about building our own technology. By the time we started doing that, we got acquired.
Question up the front here.
First, I'm very impressed by your energy.
Yeah.
And I'm happy because I'm not the first French to talk, so now I can sit down. I hope is there some other French in the room, or? Okay, well, only 3? That's fine again.
I guess you can ask in French the question.
Oui, on peut parler en français si vous préférez. Un petit peu. My question is, we all have ID project concept in mind, and we want to share it with a lot of people around, like you and maybe other people in the room. Do you have a solution to share easily your information, videos of concept, everything in mind? And if yes, what? I have my idea, but I would like to have your opinion about it.
Share your idea.
Yeah, I always joke with students in my course, actually get your competitors steal your idea. And I actually actively have them just call their competitors up, because the truth is a lot of them just don't care. They're like, who are you? Why are you calling me? They've got some other product roadmap, especially if they're big. They've got who knows, months and years of product roadmap out there. They're not going to notice you until you make a big splash. By the time you make a big splash, you're hopefully already light years ahead of them, and their options are to either acquire you or copy you. If they try to copy you, maybe they'll get 1/10 of your innovative idea, but you'll have more brand loyalty.
Other question in the front row here?
So our product has multiple pieces, and so we're having to figure out the logistics on. There are manufacturers who do offer secondary services where they hold the inventory for you, right? If you have a lot of pieces that require kitting. Or there's another company I found called Shopwire. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they have locations around the world actually that will hold the inventory for you. What are the pros and cons of either that you can share?
Like a logistics company.
Do they have
And they ship it, right?
Do they have minimums, like the amount that they'll hold? Do they do insurance? Do they do international versus domestic?
Well, actually, most of the CMs and ODMs that I've worked with, the contract manufacturers and the outside development manufacturers that I've worked with, they'll do that as part of their trying to expanding their services, right? Even Rocket EMS here in Santa Clara, which makes boards and stuff, or Sonic, I'll give them a plug too. Sonic and Fremont, they're trying to do more end-to-end kind of logistics too. So they'll manufacture the product for you and bring in, they'll get all the parts, they'll manufacture it, from a hardware perspective, they'll put it all together, and they'll even, help design a box, and they'll store it for you, and they'll ship it out. They're trying to raise their services to be more than just a contract manufacturer. I mean, the margins are just so thin, right? So if they can get into more higher value services, then they'll do that. So that's been my experience, is just get the manufacturer to do a lot of those things. And they'll do it kind of for free, you know.
So I used to be a lawyer. But then I switched to the dark side, to the startups. But you know, part of me still, when I hear inventory and holding inventory and all that, you know, kind of triggers some of those thoughts. You have to be careful. If you hold inventory in another state, you might be actually liable for taxes in that particular state, whether it's sales tax or the local government coming after you saying that you need to pay them a part of the revenue. So, you know, you also need to be aware of that, because it's a lot of regulatory, you know, bureaucracy that you need to go through. So that's something that you need to look and see if the local company is taking care of that, or you have to do it.
Yeah, and I think part of that goes to how do you actually optimize the manufacturing, the operations process. So in a perfect world, you have zero inventory. Because you have inventory, you're basically holding product that you can't, that's not cash in the bank. So in a perfect world, you want to sort of optimize the, each production run and each shipment in terms of what you're selling, so that you have as little inventory as possible.
Question from the crowd here.
Hi, my name is Vamshi. So I know that this is one of the forums where you get some sort of advice related to the startups and stuff, but is there any other forum where you can constantly seek guidance from the starting stage of the startup till like throughout the process, entire process, in terms of where you can find some mentorship, seek mentorship and like take suggestions and stuff like that? Not the one-time ones, but the continuous scheduled sort of mentor programs. Is there anything like that? Like, are you aware of it?
Yeah, I think the question was, do you know of any specific meetups or events which specifically focuses on product development process that you guys and have been part of in the past or currently that you can meet regularly with and help learn this? Many times startup companies, you have to have a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things, and so you can't be experts, and so it's helpful to go to these events and do a deep dive. Anybody part of any associations or any sort of meetup groups that help deep dive? You have some videos, for example, right?
So I think it's a question to him because he's been part of like 4 or 5 startups.
Yeah, so there's meetup.com, right? There's a number of professional associations. I'm part of an organization called the Silicon Valley Product Management Association, which is a good place to meet product managers. And once a year, typically in March or April, we run a conference called Product Camp, where people get together and talk about product issues. So
those are sort of one-time things, right? One-time events. Like I was asking about like continuous mentoring programs where they sort of like give the guidance from the beginning, like certain students.
Yeah, I think an accelerated, even though it's going to be like a 3 to 6 month, most of the programs I think have been designed for a particular stage, and then at some point you graduate. Sorry, so most of these programs have been designed for like a particular stage. It's kind of like our education system. So once you get past a certain level, you graduate, and then you have a new. It's not ongoing. But if you're looking for something where at least in a period of 3 to 6 months you want sort of that mentorship on a daily or weekly basis, then like you mentioned, an accelerator or an incubator can be valuable. Or even looking for advisors or creating your own like advisory board based on what your immediate needs are. But keep in mind, it's going to be in flux. Like as you grow, you want to replace that with new people because you have new challenges.
Okay, to
I think if I understand
Well,
correctly, it's like there is no single entity, but
No.
depending on your requirement, you need to visit.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked earlier about the build, test, iterate process. You know, our member companies have the same types of issues. Once again, I mentioned before, you know, we're, you know, a little bit about a lot of things. And so the question I really had was, what specifically are some of the tool sets that you guys use to help test customer feedback loop? To be able to go and get that for both B2B type companies and B2C type companies in mobile. Specifically, if there's any sort of you know, with B2B, is it, obviously direct emails one way. There's probably some others in mobile. Any particular services that you know specifically?
Probably like Mixpanel, if you're not using Mixpanel already to measure, especially for those of you who might be A/B testing features, that's a great product to use because it very quickly tells you where the drop-off points are. It also helps you tell the drop-off points for like conversion, monetization, that. So if you're not using something like Mixpanel. Another one is Segment.io. That's if you really want to start segmenting your customers and figuring out who are the ones that are likely to upgrade, who are likely to refer others, etc. So those are two products that I highly recommend. Once you're in the stages of like that launch cycle, or you have launched and you're kind of struggling with traction, I would say take the time to get one of your developers to implement those.
Right, so on the software side, I'd like to add user testing right to that mix. And if you're early, right, I would go do some reading on Steve Blank or Eric Ries. There's another gentleman in Switzerland named Alex Osterwalder, and he built a template called the Business Canvas. So it's a diagram with 9 building blocks that theoretically should be able to model any business. And the idea is as you go out and talk to customers, you update each box.
Ray, at LiveScribe, when you were there, you know, I'm an early adopter. I buy all the new stuff early, okay? And that pin, I loved it. It was first of its kind at that time. It was very big, you know. But how did you guys do user testing with that? I mean, you could have went in different ways. You could have went the educational marketing, which I think you launched initially, and then you moved into the business sector. How did you figure out which one to go to, and how did you do user testing with that?
Business people have more money.
Okay.
That's one reason. But you know what we did? We did something kind of very old school. We put in ads in Craigslist and said, hey, you want to test out a new product? You know, we'll give you $50 or some Starbucks cards or whatever. We'd bring them in and put on a camera. And you know what? We did the exact same thing at Amazon. I mean, you'd think that a big company like Amazon, they had very kind of, I'll say cheesy, they just set up a conference room, they'd set up a GoPro or whatever and just hung it over and we just asked questions and just let the guy go, recorded it. And the secret really was the editing of the product manager or the beta program manager would actually go through the hours of video and then take the snippets and then put them on a hit list, if you will, you know, the best of, and present it to the crowd like this. There'd be like 50 or 100 people and there'd be all engineers and we'd talk about this one feature and everybody stumbled on that feature and they all tried to do this. And that didn't work, and so they're all going like, "Oh, you got to get smarter testers," you know. Yeah, that's the kind of feedback. But then eventually they start talking to each other, and it's like, "Yeah, that's okay. I understand now," and that's how you get things moving. Kind of the old-fashioned way worked best for us.
Question up in the front.
Yeah, in a statement. I'm an independent inventor, so I hear your pain on that mentorship you did along the way, because I went through the process by myself, and there was always times I needed people, and there was nowhere to go. So I'm working on a website for that, but unfortunately it's not going to be for a while. For you guys, it's an upstream question. I conceived an idea for a product that solved the problem. There was a definitive answer for it. So I made a prototype, and I tested it, and it just worked better than I thought. So I handed it out to a few people, and they tested it, and they liked it so much they put money into the company. So I went out and manufactured it, and I did it in China. It turned out that they were able to defer a lot of my costs, so it just happened to go to China. The biggest problem is time. You know, you get a sample back, you say, I need this and this, and you guys send it back, and that's the biggest problem with China, but I had great results with China. The problem, though, was that my product it turned out to be was revolutionary. I had it tested, once I had it manufactured, I had it tested by a great number of people. 7 out of 10 of them said, we love this product, we want it, we'll buy it. The 3 out of 10 said, well, there's some problems with it, but they all end up saying we like the product. We just want these things changed on it. So the R&D was there for companies to give. I'm sorry?
What's the question?
Okay. No one in the stores, the gatekeepers, the buyers for the stores would buy it because it was revolutionary. I could not get manufacturers who manufactured products in the same product line to take it on because it was revolutionary. Everybody was afraid that if they took it on and it failed, even though they liked it, that they would possibly lose their jobs. I could not get the traction with these big companies. I even went to Home Depot, flew to Atlanta to open a buy day.
You know, sometimes you can be ahead of time, right? Sometimes your product can be, you know, so revolutionary, like you said, it's really hard for others to comprehend, right? So maybe, I mean, there's plenty of, you know, timing to market is very important. And if you don't nail it, you know, sometimes people don't understand what you're doing, right? Like, what was it? There were other people, yeah.
The guy,
I know.
It was validated,
Yeah.
that's the problem. It was
If the
absolutely
customer-
validated. It
Yeah.
went through all the stuff you just talked
So I
about.
still don't know the question, Robert. Robert, what's the question?
Where do you go from here?
Where do we go from here?
You can't get the buyers, and you can't get the corporations.
Problem. It sounds like a distribution problem. And if you can't get distribution in a mainstream place, you got to control your own distribution. So you go online, you set up a website, like you said, and then you've got to figure out how to acquire your customers that way. If you said you already have customers that like your product, then they should be your early evangelists, and they should help drive more traffic.
We got another you have another question.
Do you do an Indiegogo? Anything like that?
No, I wish Indiegogo was around at the time. Mine was 10 years ago.
I mean, it's good now.
I'm near the end of my patent, so it's really a little bit late to go in Indiegogo.
We'll got another question in the back here.
My name is Julia. My question is for Purnima. What are the best strategies to build a user base for mobile app?
Oh God, that's a good question. I wish I knew that. I think the first is, you know, is the product that you have conceived, are you only going mobile first? Because if you're going mobile first, then you want to think about how do you get your, you know, mobile distribution strategy. If it's not a mobile first app where you can have a web presence, then I think you've really got to leverage the web to drive traffic to the mobile app. And I see this as an initial strategy for a lot of new mobile apps that come out. It's if they can build even a simple web app, so they get the SEO, they get the SEM, AdWords, all that juice, great. Because yes, mobile discovery, as you've already noticed, is a challenge. I think depending on your product, you've got to build up a lot of the reviews on, if you're going to sell it through the App Store, like build the review base. You've got to figure out how to make it best in class. And then I know that there's a lot of like app engines out there. So I'm sorry, this is like not my area of expertise, so I don't have a wealth of knowledge to give you. I know it's a challenge, so it's kind of what I can suggest. Maybe these guys actually have more knowledge.
I'm not a mobile guy.
I have another, Dave, you want to add, or I have another question?
Go ahead.
Another question.
Hello, I'm Levan. So I have a question about ideas. So there is a lot of discussion going on about should you fill the gap in the existing demand and try to search to find the demand in the existing market, or there is a possibility to create demand and build a product which doesn't exist on the market and it's completely new, and there is no demand also doesn't exist. So what do you think about that? Is it possible or not? Thank you.
Yeah, who knew we needed Facebook, right? Look where they are. So definitely you can create your own market, and it's actually a better way to do that. Look at Google, the same. They build AdWords market. Creating your own market is the way to go, because you can drive that innovation, and you're not competing with the incumbents, which sometimes it's harder to take on. Definitely look for innovative markets, create your own market, but you also want to make sure the timing is right? Because you can be too ahead of the market and not get enough traction. So, you know, it's like need to be somewhere in between.
So creating your own market, it's the same as kind of like creating your own category. And any marketing person will tell you that's hard, and it costs a lot of money, it takes a lot of time. Because you have to create that mental model that if you said Google, you know AdWords, you know search, but before Google there was like 10 very popular search engines, and they all did great. And then Google came along and took that away. I mean, they just said, just like what you know, but better, right? They didn't really invent the category at all. And Facebook was a book. I mean, it was a book, right? You could actually look and have everybody's face in it, and they just made it from analog to digital, right? So the secret, I think, is making a minor step. This is actually a problem we had at LiveScribe. LiveScribe is a digital smart pen, and it did a lot of these great things. It captured your handwriting and stuff like that. But nobody knew where to put it in the store. Really, they didn't know where to put it in the store. So it's like, we wound up, well, can't really put you with the computers, it's not really a phone, so we wound up next to the calculators or something, And so that really hampered their sales a lot. And that shows that it was so a large step that even the stores, retailers, and people, they didn't know where to put it. So try to find something that's not quite as big a step. If you're finding that problem, if it's really revolutionary, and it's so much that people can't get their head about, it's too big of a step. Try to find something that's a smaller step.
A question in the back? If you go ahead and speak your question, I will then say it over the speaker. Good. So the question is, they're from South Korea, a startup company from South Korea, just starting their company here, moved here. What's your suggestions on the best way for them to start building out their team, specifically in the product side of it? Resources to help them who are coming out from different countries.
So I've got an idea there. So one thing that I've seen other small companies get successful with is they have some kind of a culture. At Lytro, we had kind of, I'll call it the Russian connection. We had some very smart PhD Russians that knew other smart PhD Russians that brought in, other Stanford grads, and it kind of blossomed from that. Other companies I've known and worked at and helped, they had like a Chinese connection. So they'd have like, calling their Chinese friends. So there'd be some kind of a social connection, because it's all about getting people. And if I were a company from Korea and starting my own company here, I wanted to start up, I would start pounding my friends who are from Korea and see if they fit what we're looking for and start there. That's the best way to get people, somebody that you can fit with culturally, to kind of get started and then go bigger.
There's also like hackathons in the Bay Area. So Code Camp and other sort of weekend organizations where people get together and they work on projects.
I would like to end it on a high note, so I want to ask the panel about failure. And I would like you to think about, products that you tried are going to be successful and they failed. Why do you think it happened? What lessons have you learned? What can you teach us about failure and how to, sometimes predict it and avoid it if possible?
So actually, the second product I built for my second startup, BusyBee, the first one was a CRM, the second one was a bill pay, and our goal was to offer next day payouts for small businesses. And you're thinking, what could possibly go wrong? This is like so well intentioned. Our goal is to get money from customers to small businesses, and then in their bank accounts, within 24 hours. So we launched, and we had a lot of great success. I thought we were basically going to get to profitability in 6 months. And I got this call from this gentleman in Australia who said, I don't know why you've charged my credit card $500, but I'd appreciate it if you refunded me the money. And I thought, oh, you know, surely, sir, you went to a gym or yoga studio. It's like, no, I'm retired, I live on a pension, that's all the money I have, I would like it back. So I was like, oh, okay, well, let's go find out what's going on. So I did some digging and discovered that we were basically running a money laundering scheme. And mind you, we had all the security protection in place, we had, you know, best practices, all of that, but we still, despite it all, had let 3 fraudsters in, and we basically had to shut the product down immediately because it would just, you know, spread like wildfire, because they basically troll the internet and tell all their buddies about it. So I shut that down, and then I didn't have the capital, so I had to figure out a way to pay back not only this guy in Australia, but everyone else. And in the midst of that, it just, you know, didn't make sense to fundraise, didn't make sense to make payroll and all this stuff, because I was just trying to figure out how to make money to pay back. So I ended up figuring out a way to pay, you know, all that money back, so don't worry. But I learned a valuable lesson in it, which was the first, you've got to have money in the bank to you know, fund your team, to build your product, etc. And if you're going to do something in the payment space, it's okay for things to be a little bit inconvenient for people. So maybe next day payout was not what we should have done. Maybe we should have done, you know, 2-day, 3-day, and reduced the amount in which we offered for the payout service. So these are all lessons that I learned.
So for me, some of the entrepreneurs I've worked with, too early. Some of them didn't have the right product market fit. Some of them fell in love with their product. No one, including the grandmother, had the heart to say, your baby is ugly, so to speak. So it's just really important to, you know, think about you know, the product, the market, and what people, you know, at the end of the day, what's the business model? What's the plan long term to make money? And I think a lot of people forget that. You know, even if you give it away for free and you went to a free premium model, you've got to get people to convert so your business scales and actually has revenue to bring in more people and build a team over time.
So I'll talk about a failure, and it's a pretty common failure, and it has nothing to do with the product and that, but more of the team and the culture. My buddies who are in investors and accelerators and things like that, they always like to repeat that the #1 cause of failures of any kind of startup environment is founders' disillusionment. You know, the founders don't get along, they thought this was going to go better, things are too tough, and they decide, you know, things just get haywire, and maybe somebody walks away and that kind of stuff. So here's what the lesson that I learned, and I hope everyone in here learns this. You know, if you have a founding team, spend time with them. Drive to LA. Go, you know, take a camping trip together and really get to know insides of other people, because until you really kind of get out of the office environment or the classroom environment and really get to know somebody, you really get to know somebody when you've driven to LA and back, you know, for a 2-day trip. Do that, spend time with them, and really get to know them, because then you have something that, you know, if you haven't been at each other's throat after doing a trip like that, then you know you've got somebody that you can actually build a company around, and then you can get over other things too. So that would be my recommendation.
I want to thank everybody for being a panelist tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you.